Welcome back to the Method YouTube channel. This is Gumdrops and I'm here to guide you through the World of Warcraft economy and gold making community news. Since Blizzcon was last month, it's been a little while since my first video here with Method, but I very much appreciate all of the feedback and comments you guys have shared so far, and I'm definitely taking it all on board and improving the series as we go. My first topic this week bounces off the recent video released by Breg, where he talks about the death of gold making in World of Warcraft, and it's an interesting discussion amongst the wider community at the moment. There's definitely a strong lack of interest in the game in general, and that is also affecting the gold making community. Several systems in the game like Warfronts, Island Expeditions, Azerite and gearing in general have missed the mark according to a lot of players, and it's caused them to quit or at least take breaks until future patching addresses all of their concerns. At the same time, Blizzard have always said there's an intentional design system to allow players to drop in and out of the game without feeling the need to play all the year round. But maybe this time the pendulum has swung a little bit too far and players are just not motivated enough to continue playing after the first few months of Battle for Azeroth. Because of this, there are fewer people in the game that you could potentially sell an item to, there are fewer materials on the auction house, and there's less activity in the overall economy. And this is reflected in the price of the WoW token, as Breg mentions in his video. It's almost halved in value since the peak in Legion, and it's very likely it will never recover until there's a new gold generating tap like the mission tables in previous expansions. People are getting less gold for the same amount of real money that they're spending, which means they have less to spend in the game itself. For the average player, it's perhaps intended that they remain in a zero-sum balance situation. An interview recently published by Hazelnutty Games with two developers at Blizzcon shared some insight on the intent behind the recent hotfix to increase the amount of gold you receive as a reward from the Emissary daily quest. The way Assistant Technical Director Frank Kolkowski describes matching how much is spent on the weekly reroll tokens was a conscious decision is an interesting choice of words to me. It makes me think that something like an average amount of gold spent per player per month number exists in the system, and they want to balance things to provide approximately the same amount of gold back just by playing the game regularly. Maybe it's balanced to be a little bit less, maybe that would encourage purchases of WoW tokens, maybe that's why there's a large interest and demand for gold making information, or maybe I'm just reading a little bit too much into it. Still though, it's interesting to speculate on how Blizzard looks at gold makers. Further to the previous interview, during the BlizzCon World of Warcraft Q&A, Game Director Ian Hazzikostas answered a question from community stalwart Reckles aka Want to Buy Gold on the state of the auction house and the 20% auction house fee. So according to Ian, the limiting factor in how many players can coexist on a single server is actually the underlying auction house infrastructure. And this is one of the primary reasons quoted for the announced overhaul to the auction house. Hearing this makes me feel a little bit sad though, as the auction house should be a flagship feature of the game and should be developed or overhauled with that in mind, since it is very rare to find such a large and intricate game-based economy to sink your teeth into. So I didn't personally get a chance to ask my own question during the Q&A, but it would have simply expanded upon Reckles' question and further asked if there would be any chance that the auction house overhaul would potentially include or bring a buy and sell order system, like in EVE Online for example, if anybody's familiar with that. Either way, the concept of item stacks, in my opinion, needs to be loosened a little bit. For example, if there's a stack of 200 Gloom Dust on the auction house at the moment, I'd personally like to be able to buy 10 of those without needing to buy the whole stack of 200. I'm curious how would you guys feel about something like that at the auction house. Well, stepping back into Azeroth for a moment, BlizzCon also brought news of patch 8.1 arriving on December 11th through the 13th depending on your region, with the new raid tier being accessible after the holiday period in January, so there should now be some time to prepare for that and stock up on some materials or crafted goods ready for that peak raid progression period. Then of course Rise of Ashara or patch 8.2 arrives early next year with lots of interesting new additions to professions specifically that were announced in the What's Next panel. These profession items are all sadly bind on pickup, so you can't actually sell them to anybody. However, to get them all, you need to work through a specific quest line for each profession, which is one thing I definitely feel is missing from Legion. In BFA, being able to rock up to an NPC and just spam that train button a whole bunch of times isn't particularly engaging for an RPG, so I'm personally very glad that Blizzard are adding a little bit more flavour back to professions again. Of course, the most intriguing of these items is the enchanting rod that will generate a few more materials per disenchant for certain items. I think it'd be safe to assume that this will only work on BFA items, but which rarity is unknown so far. Maybe it will only work on uncommon and rare items or green and blue. Extra crystals from epics sure would be nice, but might be a little bit too much in the eyes of Blizzard. The jewel crafting item will only work for stuff that you have equipped yourself, but this could have been an amazing opportunity to replicate Vanilla's charge for a service system, where you'd offer to unsocket the gems of gear owned by other players for a small fee. Thinking about how that would affect the gem market is maybe best saved for another discussion. So a final note on BlizzCon, you can of course check the full coverage of the event and what's to come in patch 8.1.5 and 8.2 on wowhead.com. I'd like to send a big shout out to the whole content team at Wowhead for all the fantastic work they did during the entire convention, so very well done guys. Now then, we're not just here to speculate and reflect on how things could or should have been, so what are people up to for gold making at the moment? Farming has always been a go-to gold making method, and farming in groups has also increased in popularity since the introduction of the personal loot system. This used to be a regular group of 5 players, however there's a new format which was introduced in a recent patch due to a change in the way the tagging system works. So the format of this is frequently referred to or known as 2x4, which means 2 groups of 4 players. Both groups will gather to farm the same thing, which normally sounds pretty counterintuitive, however everyone gets loot in both the groups in these particular farms. So the way it works is that when anyone from group 1 tags a particular mob, all 4 players in that group will get the loot as normal, but this will leave 1 slot on the mob for the tag list for someone else to come along and also get loot. It just so happens now that if that 5th person on the tag list is also part of a second group of 4 players, i.e. group 2, then everyone in the second group will also receive the loot. That means 8 players can potentially farm in the same spot, which leads to some very interesting and high value farms. Generally, these 2x4 groups look for mobs or enemies that are in an area for quests or events. That means that these mobs are designed to be readily available so that nobody has to wait around to complete a quest or the event. So, in theory, the faster the mobs are killed, the faster they will respawn, and therefore the more loot that everybody will get. Speaking of loot though, you can expect to get raw gold and gold from vendoring the grey items that drop. You'll also get crafting materials like tide spray linen. You'll get green BOEs that you can sell to other players that advertise in the trade chat, or you can use them yourself to shuffle into enchanting materials. Plus there's also a chance of epic BOEs and rare items like mounts. So you'll often find tons and tons of groups active in your regions. Just search for 2x4 in the group finder and you're more than welcome to tag along. Everybody's super friendly on these group farms. Reddit community member Asian Phenom made great use of this particular style of farming and recently made over 5 million gold in the space of 1 month, and they shared their story in a post outlining their key points of this strategy. So they already identified that sitting in front of the auction house and reposting all day every day was not particularly interesting for them personally, nor was the volume of material markets viable on their server for consistent profits by buying and reselling at a higher price. Even while farming though, they would have a second account running in the background, potentially sniping items that were posted at the wrong price or undervalued, which can often pay for itself, or even more if you're particularly lucky. On the topic of group content, and before I move on here, I'd really like to see a little bit more thought spent on genuine collaborative gold making situations. So group farms and group content for profession related activities is a very cool idea to me. Some of my favourite examples of this in the past were actually completely unintended. So taking a look at the seed raids in Legion, which allowed someone in a raid of 10 to plant herb seeds like Starlight Rose, and then everybody else in the raid could all gather from that one node. Then the garrison fishing in Warlords of Draenor, when you could acquire the trading card game Turtle Mount. And I think it'd be really cool if you had a bunch of blacksmiths or leatherworkers, for example, all working together to increase the yield of their crafts, or allowing each other to benefit from some kind of perk or bonus that only a group could make use of. So looking elsewhere in the community, some of you guys may already know the Lazy Goldmaker. His spreadsheets and Legion Gold Guide were very highly revered in the community. The good news is that he has recently launched the Battle for Azeroth version of his goldmaking guide to live alongside his current expansion spreadsheet. The guide itself is pretty much everything you could possibly want to know about professions, endgame content, trade skill master, being efficient with your time, aka being lazy, plus making use of a second account to maximize your gold making potential. The spreadsheet as well is a fantastic tool to keep track of your server pricing and apply your specific character's recipe ranks. and you can identify any potential profit points. So for example, if you put in your server data with Trade Skill Master, it will pull in pricing information automatically for herbs, and then you can check the alchemy page for your potions and your flasks and look at how much gold you could potentially make even with all of the rank 3 procs considered. Even if you don't have professions, you can use it as a tracking tool when you're on the go at work or at school, giving you a head start on what you're actually going to do when you eventually log into the game. There'll be links to Lazy Goldmaker's guides and spreadsheets in the description below if you'd like to find him online. Finally, I wanted to propose an idea to you guys and judge whether you'd be interested in it. It's basically an expanded podcast style video series which would be hosted by myself, Gumdrops, Reckles aka Want to Buy Gold, and the Lazy Goldmaker. I discussed it a little bit with Want to Buy Gold at Blizzcon, and we feel like it's a cool idea, especially in the format of a roundtable where we would pick a couple of questions or topics from the gold making community to discuss a little bit more in depth, considering all of our various perspectives and experience in gold making. So what I would like to know is if you guys listen to longer form content in the form of podcasts or YouTube videos, and if you do, or even if you don't, would you be interested in something like this for gold making in World of Warcraft? So that brings things to an end for the second method gold making recap. Hopefully you all heard some interesting tips or information that you can then apply to your own gold making. If you did, please leave a like on the video and a comment letting us know. I'll also be answering any questions again that you might have under the video, and as always, don't forget to subscribe for more updates from Method. If you have been, thanks so much for listening. My name is Gumdrops with Method and Wowhead. If you'd like to find me online, check the links in the description for my Twitter and Twitch, where I'm streaming 3 times a week with gold making and Trade Skill Master Q&A sessions. So until next time guys, take it easy and happy gold making.